Seeing it's 6 p.m., I'd like to call the October 5th, 2022 regular meeting of the Kansas City Council to order. I'd like to welcome everybody here this evening and ask that if you are able, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Naxted?
Here.
Councilmember Petty?
Here.
Councilmember Winger?
Present.
Councilmember Baisden?
Here.
Student Representative Thibodeau?
Here.
Mayor Gabriel?
Here.
Vice Mayor Glendenning?
Here.
Councilmember Sonart?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Council, before we get to agenda approval, I'd like to call your attention to a laydown with requested additions to the packet that you should have in front of you. Action, add to item F2, resolution number 2022-64, postponement memo requested by administration. Action, add to item J3, city clerk report, October 4, 2022, unofficial results requested by the city clerk. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxted.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move for approval of the agenda with the add item F2 and J3. Request unanimous consent.
Second.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next, we have the consent agenda. Councilmember Naxted.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move for approval of the consent agenda and request unanimous consent. Second.
Is there anybody on the body that'd like to amend the consent agenda at this time? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to please read the consent agenda into the record.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Approval of the joint work session minutes of September 21st, 2022. Approval of the regular meeting minutes of September 21st, 2022. Action approval, bills to be ratified brought by the administration. Action approval, purchases or orders over $15,000 brought by the administration. Action approval, consent to the assignment and assumption of a lease of ADL 37765 ATS 770 to TK Enterprises LLC, brought to you by the administration, and introduction of ordinance number 3318-2022, renaming and amending Kenai Municipal Code, Chapter 7.30, Land Sale Permanent Fund to establish the Kenai Senior Center Cone Memorial Trust, and directing all proceeds received as a residual beneficiary from the Tamara Diane Cone Testamentary Trust to be deposited into such funds. Brought to you by the administration. Public hearing on October 19th, 2022. And ordinance number 3319-2022, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the Kenai Bluff Erosion Capital Project Fund for construction of the Kenai Bluff Stabilization Project, brought to you by the administration. Public hearing on October 19th, 2022, and that is your consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to any item that's on the consent agenda, which was just read into the record by the clerk? Anybody online? Seeing no one, bring it back to council. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. That brings us to scheduled public comment. And at this time, I'd like to ask Chief Ross to come up, and he will be introducing a gentleman who will be discussing the Kenai Police Department accreditation. Chief Ross.
Thank you, Mayor. So before I introduce the speaker who's going to talk about the police department's accreditation, I just wanted to say a couple quick things. Accreditation has been a goal the police department's worked on here for at least the last year, but some things leading up to that in the prior years. So it's been a huge project, and I won't go into the whole accreditation. Our speaker's going to do that. So I just wanted to, before he spoke, thank Lieutenant Langham. I asked him to come tonight because he's been our accreditation manager, and he's put an immense amount of work into this. So he's kind of got us to where we're at. And so when you hear the speaker talk about accreditation, the effort really belongs to Lieutenant Langham. And I'll also thank Scott Bloom. He did a lot of legal review on policies and procedures and things throughout the last year that was super helpful to us getting accredited. So with that, I'll introduce Scott Hayes. He's the Executive Director of the Oregon Accreditation Alliance, and he's going to talk about the police department's accreditation.
Hi, thank you, Chief. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me okay.
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you turn his volume up just a little bit?
Okay. Super. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Manager, council members, and members of the community. As introduced, I am Scott Hayes, Executive Director of the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. I appreciate the opportunity to address the council and present the Kenai Police Department with its first award of accreditation under the leadership of Chief David Ross. The Kenai Police Department is the fourth agency in the state of Alaska to join OAA and receive the award of accreditation. Law enforcement is experiencing a changing society with increased demands on police accountability and transparency. As in the past, our profession must face these challenges and work within our communities to address our concerns. Accreditation is one step towards building community trust and legitimacy of our profession. This is a monumental step for any agency to be evaluated by an outside entity and have its policies and practices scrutinized. Accreditation goals are very straightforward. They are to support the continued improvement of law enforcement services, to establish best practice through professional standards, to establish agency accountability and transparency, and to enhance the management of overall operations. The Oregon Accreditation Alliance was founded under the direction of the Association of Chiefs of Police, the State Sheriff's Association, and the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials. We provide accreditation services for 81 law enforcement agencies and communications centers in Oregon and Alaska. There are 106 standards that the Kenai Police Department has to adhere to. In addition to those 106, there are a number of bullets that have to be all addressed within department policies and procedures. These standards are based on best practice nationally and through changes in Alaskan law. In addition to each of these standards, the agency must also show proof of compliance that the agency is following the policies and best practices set forth in our accreditation process. I know that a number of staff members were involved in this whole process, but I would like to, as the chief did, recognize Lieutenant Ben Langham as the agency's accreditation manager, who worked very closely with our assessors and myself throughout the entire process. He did a phenomenal job preparing the agency for review. And I must say that of our 81 agencies, they were definitely in the top of getting their policies, their procedures, and their proofs of compliance all entered properly and displayed so that our assessors could easily read the information and complete a final report for the 22-member board that oversees the accreditation and has to approve the entire process. So, Chief, on behalf of the Oregon Accreditation Alliance and its board of directors, I'd like to present you with your first award of accreditation. And as the saying goes, it's in the mail. So in a short period of time, I'm not sure that this will focus on that, but we have, well, I'm sorry, it will not focus, but you'll receive your official certification that's framed that you can put in your office. I know that I have sent you our final report for your review. And at this point, if any board members have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Hayes? Councilmember Basin.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Mr. Hayes, what does this mean for the police officers that work underneath the chief and lieutenant for the department? How does this help them in their performance moving forward?
Well, they basically know that the officers can rest assured that they know that the agency has provided them with policies and procedures that are in line with best practice and national standards. And basically what that also means is if you have sound, solid policies, then it keeps the agency out of lawsuits and liability. It also keeps the agency's staff, chief, and command staff out of the front page of the paper. And we focus on those issues on accreditation that will keep the department sound and safe and the officers themselves out of any trouble. So the officers can also look at it as it's a badge of honor. You're only the fourth agency to receive this in Alaska. And there are others that are participating in this right now who have not become accredited. But the key takeaway with this is the fact that the officers can rest assured that their policies are now not just isolated to what Kenai had at one point, but they are now looking at the best standards which are nationally known.
Councilmember Beza.
Thank you. It's follow-up. So I want to thank the chief and lieutenant for what they've done. I understand accreditation from previous career, a lot of work. Do you have to, so Mr. Hayes, does the Kenai Police Department, do they have to do something annually to maintain this accreditation going forward?
Yes, sir. So what happens is reaccreditation occurs every 3 years. And so we will be back every 3 years to review policies and procedures and proof of compliance to ensure that the agency is still complying with the standards that we set up. During that 3-year period, on an annual basis, if not more, we reevaluate those legislative actions, both in Oregon and Alaska, that will directly affect the operation of the police department. And we will update our standards on an annual basis to ensure that they are complying with those. So there are a number of standards that require annual analysis. They involve high-risk items. So the department will conduct annual reviews of pursuits, use of force, bias crime reporting, and internal affairs investigations. And the big one also, property and evidence auditing. So there is a requirement, and on an annual basis, annual reports and annual analyses are conducted, and subsequently at year 3, we review all of those reports.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Vice Mayor Glendening.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Just a question. This accreditation, it would set our department up as an example, and it's be a positive attractant. And I could assume from this that it would help with our attraction for qualified candidates. Is this correct?
Was that presented to me in a question?
Yeah, I believe it was, Mr. Hayes.
Yeah, I will tell you that you are absolutely correct. This is not an easy process. It is, at least for the initial, it becomes easier during the reaccreditation process. And yes, I can tell you that it is a badge of honor to either have this on your website, and we encourage that, and we have information that the agency can put on their website that shows their accredited status, decals on cars, and pins. A lot of agencies in the state of Oregon, for example, put the decals on their cars because it's important to them to recognize to the citizens that they are accredited. Accredited means a lot. You see accreditation in college, you see accreditation in medical, and you see accreditation in law enforcement. I can also tell you, and this may drift a little bit from this, drift away from what you're asking, but it's becoming a national trend. For an example, the state of Oregon now requires agencies with 35 members or more to become accredited by 2025. It's a mandate by the legislature. federally, we are also looking at accreditation. 2 years ago, there was a push to become, for agencies throughout the United States to become accredited. It's a movement that is moving forward, and basically, Kenai Police Department is in front of that train. And we are looking at expanding both federally and in the state of Alaska with the accreditation process. And for an example, myself and 2 other board members will be attending the FBI National Academy Association meeting in December to speak to all of Alaska concerning accreditation.
Thank you. It was a very thorough answer. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any further questions of Mr. Hayes? I got one in sort of a, I guess, just thinking what events have happened, nationwide in the last several years. Have the national standards changed that you are, implementing in the accreditation program?
Yes, actually, if you recall back 2 years, there was a presidential order put out. It was based on a riot and a death which occurred. And the presidential order basically said that they were restricting the use of the carotid control hold, or more commonly known as a chokehold, as being prohibited unless deadly force was used. That mandate also indicated that law enforcement agencies had to adhere to federal standards and basically adhere to federal standards. There was a number of other issues that were brought up, such as no-knock warrants, which were not mandatory. However, there is a shift to make those mandatory. So what happens is the federal government comes to the accrediting body for that particular state, which is Oregon Accreditation Association, and says, if an agency wants federal funding through the Department of Justice, then they have to adhere to federal standards. And 2 years ago, all of our agencies had to sign off on that to say that if they were going to receive federal funding. So there's kind of like this attachment and a big push to move accreditation forward and to push federal legislation onto to lower agencies.
Thank you.
I think that
Yeah, no, that was well done.
hopefully that's,
It was well done. Thank you.
thank you.
Any further questions of Mr. Hayes? Seeing none, thank you for taking time to present to us
Thank you
this
very
evening.
much. You're more than welcome. Have a good night, and Chief, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight.
Thank you. Any questions of Chief Ross while he's there? Councilmember Basin.
Thank you, Mayor. So again, I guess Chief Ross and Lieutenant Lingham, I've known both these gentlemen for quite a few years, and I know it's a big deal for both of you. Congratulations. Thanks for all the hard work you're doing and keeping the community safe.
Thank you.
Councilmember Weir?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I too just want to echo what Mr. Basin said. Thank you, Chief Ross and Lieutenant Lingham, for your work on this and continued diligence in your department. So thank you.
Councilmember Petty?
Gentlemen, I'd like to say I'm so very thankful that y'all are being proactive in this accreditation before it's required. It keeps us out of the newspaper, keeps our citizens safe, and I graciously appreciate all the hard work that went into this, and most excellent congratulations on being the first on the peninsula.
Councilmember Sonner?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Thank you to both of you for working on this and spearheading this. This is a huge project. And congratulations. This is a milestone for your department, and I'm very, very glad to live here under the protection of your department. Thank you.
Further questions? Councilmember Naxton?
Thank you. Of course, wonderful, but you did suggest maybe a sticker on the cruisers or something like that. Is that something that your department might be looking at doing? And will it be? Is there going to be cake too?
We haven't discussed any of the stickers or what we might put on the website, but I could see us probably putting something on the website and maybe on our Facebook. We hadn't discussed that, so I haven't given that much thought. One thing that was not mentioned here is kind of pales in comparison to the effort, but there is insurance savings to the city as well. So there's some ongoing costs with accreditation, but the insurance savings will be greater than the ongoing costs. It's not a lot. I think it's 5% off the law enforcement liability policy with our current insurance carrier, but it pays for the cost of accreditation plus a little bit.
Thank you. You actually answered my question. That was actually the question that I had, because I just intuitively would think that there would be some sort of a, if you get a sprinkler system in your house, you get a save on, fire insurance. So certainly appreciate the effort and being, I think the word proactive, in being out in front of this, very forward thinking, and appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks. That brings us to unscheduled public comment. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to the council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Please come forward. And Ms. Smalley.
My name is Susan Smalley, S-M-A-L-L-E-Y, and I live on Linwood Lane. My apologies to the clerk's office. The reason I asked to be removed, as you know, was to not cause more focus on the clerks during the busy time of year. I'm sorry it didn't work that way, so I come with an invitation to every council member, and maybe the attorney too. If anyone believes that I, as a 40-plus year voter, worker, canvas worker, committed illegal activities by working illegally, then I really invite you to contact the State Division of Elections, because that's where it lands. Right now, it's a charge, and I feel it really personally. And Hal didn't come tonight because this isn't about him, it's about me. Maybe it's indirectly about him, but he has never done an official write-in campaign. So I have never worked I've gone off to Soldotna to work when he was running over here. I've never worked illegally. So please consider that as an invitation to contact the Division of Elections, because I'd really love to have this cleared up. It really doesn't sully my reputation because it's silly. But I invite you to, and I'm willing to ask, I'm willing to answer questions, but I don't have any answers. And I did apologize to Shelley. I apologized to the borough, because my idea of pulling my name was so that they didn't have to research it. They didn't have to respond to it. But I think I need to respond to it because I was attacked. And I was attacked in public, on the radio, in this place, in this city. I've lived for 48 years, and I've worked as a volunteer in so many ways. And I'm not going to give you my whole resume, but it hurt. And then I actually was kind of proud, because it's like I'm this important person that would rig election, has already rigged election apparently by working there. So that's where I am, and I appreciate your time and your listening. And if you contact the Division of Elections, they'll be in touch. So that's all I have.
Any questions of Ms. Smalley? I would just like to say I'd like to thank you for your service, for your work on elections through the years. I think you said 40 years, which is, as long as I can remember. And, it takes time when you do that commitment. As I've noticed from folks that work elections, that they're very committed to making sure those elections are done well, and appreciate your efforts there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Petty.
Thank you, Ms. Molly, for coming in and setting the record straight. I also wanted to say I appreciate your integrity by not, during this busy season of elections, and not requiring our clerks to put in such other unnecessary work. And thank you for sacrificing your time and not serving. And I appreciate that. And I also want to say I greatly appreciate the helping maintain the integrity of our election, which is the foundation of our country. Thank you.
And I have a little snarky remark. It's like Mickey Mouse always appears as a write-in on the ballot, and Minnie Mouse is never forbidden from working the elections.
Thank you, Ms. Foley. Is there anybody else from the general public that would like to address the council on this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Please come forward. If you would give your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Chera Wackler. I actually live in Soldotna, Alaska. Don't hold that against me. I was in a rush to get here, so I'm trying to calm myself. Okay, so I am here to speak about an organization that we started just back in August. And there's a box back there you can see. When a woman is confronted with an unexpected period, it can create a huge, overwhelming emotional ordeal. And here's the thing. We don't know when our periods are going to come. It's not an exact science, despite what some might think. Nearly 1 in 4 students have struggled to access period supplies during the last school year. And nearly 80% either have missed class time themselves or know someone who has missed class time because of their lack of access to appropriate supplies. Peninsula Period Network is a new local nonprofit dedicated to ending period poverty and trauma associated with not having access to these essential hygiene products by supplying them to each and every KPBSD school through community donations of products and money, as well as seeking grant funds for the coming years. As an official 501c3 since the first week of August 2022, we've already raised over $3,568.26 through the City of Soldotna and surrounding community members towards our goal of $10,000, which is all we need to supply every menstruator in all KPBS schools for the year. The supplies generated through this initiative will be distributed through student volunteers we call advocates, who will refill the products and let us know when their school needs more. If you'd like to donate products, you can find donation locations such as these at the Soldotna Library, Formation Chiropractic, Soldotna Professional Pharmacy, in Kenai at Encore Dance, and at the Kenai Community Library, Seward at the Library Museum, and Nikiski at Bell and Beyond. We do get a significant reduction per item when we purchase in bulk, and to donate towards that, you can reach us online at www.peninsulaperiodnetwork.org, where we have easy Venmo and Square card payments. Free the Tampon did a national study of women over the age of 18 that menstruate. 86% of them said that they have been caught without the supplies that they need in a public space. 78% said that they were forced to improvise with other materials like rolling toilet paper. In virtually every school in America, we send our daughters to the nurse's office like they're sick. Each of us is either one or knows a menstruator, and these girls should never be in a position to have to roll one themselves. So I just wanted to introduce the program that we have going on, and I'm kind of jumping the gun, but I did apply to the Kenai Mini Grant Program. So, good luck on that one. And if you guys have any questions about how we want to implement the program or what we've done so far, please let me know.
Could you say and spell your name again for the record?
Chera, C-H-E-R-A.
Sure.
Last name is Wackler, W-A-C-K-L-E-R.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Warrior.
Thank you, Ms. Wackler, for coming and presenting. I think this is great program. I personally myself have kids in elementary and middle school and do provide products to the nurse at the start of the school year because I know it is a real thing.
I do the same thing.
Yes. And that just leads me into 2 questions. Is what grade levels are we targeting? Is this a middle school, high school, or elementary schools involved in that?
Absolutely. So,
Okay.
Sorry.
No, and if you don't mind answering, then I do have one more.
Absolutely. Because the trauma associated with not having access to them, especially when you're a first-time menstruator, one of the things about it is that up until about there's been a shift. So first-time menstruators used to be, on average, about age 12. It's still about average age 12, but it's shifting towards age 11. About 10% of menstruators start before the age of 10. Which is about the 4th, 5th grade level. Almost all menstruators start by age 14. So we are absolutely focusing on elementary as well. Now, one of the things with implementation is every school is going to be different. We have boxes that we can put in there. I've spoken with the nurse at Soldotna L, which is where my kids go to school, and she suggested we designate one stall for that one, which is kind of like the back stall that the adults use, and then letting the girls know that there's access in there, as opposed to putting them like on the mirror or in just the front like we would do in the high school. Now, you know, every school will want to implement differently. We're okay with simply supplying the nurse, but we'd really like to avoid girls having to go to the nurse in a situation where they have to. I mean, it creates a much bigger deal than it has to be. So.
Thank you for that. And then my other last question is students in transition. Is this definitely gonna support that program? Because those kids are definitely, you know, in between household, and they're the ones that have the most excruciating circumstances. So is that really gonna encompass that program?
Yeah, actually, Kelly King is a friend of mine. I went to school with her out in Nikiski, and I presented to the Kenai Peninsula Borough School District at their meeting. Was that yesterday or yeah? The days are all blending together. And she was there as well. I'd spoken to her before about the program and let her know that we're here to support them. So obviously this program is for what we're talking about in the schools would be stuff that's there that we refill on an ongoing basis. But supplementally, we're here to support that program. I spoke with her yesterday about getting packets together for initial she said it's really hard for them. That's one of the first things that girls ask for in the program is menstrual supplies. It's hard for them to get and they're expensive. And so we could get some packs ready for her to give them initially, and then also some summer and spring break, things like that, so that she has access so that she can just give them out herself. We've also spoken with another organization, 9 Star, which helps some adults who are in they're furthering or finishing GED programs, things like that. So the reason why the name is the Peninsula Peer Network is, one, because we want it to be all-encompassing. Our focus really is getting them in the schools right now as a step one. Step two will definitely be supporting other organizations that need them and us being sort of a conduit to help. Now, Homer High School has started, or middle school, I'm trying to remember, has started a program themselves, where a student-led program where they're already supplying them. I'm not going to take it away from them, but I'm going to support them. I'm going to be there to give them products, help fundraise, and just, you know, anybody who's given away products, we want to be there to help them.
Great, thank you very much.
Any other questions of Ms. Wackler? Thank you. Is there anybody else from the general public that'd like to address the council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Ms. Nelson.
I guess that's my cue, huh? To try to be as quick as possible, tomorrow night, first Thursday, is the reception for this month's show, and it is the juried show, and it is a huge show for 2 reasons. First one being that we allowed 3 entries per artist per person, so that, as we have discovered over the past couple of years, almost always means a really big show. And a juried show, to say again, a juror juries the show first and doesn't always accept everything. Most of the time doesn't accept everything, and that can be looked at from a national, state, region-wide, community-wide, Kenai-wide, Ninilchik Fair area, different kinds of jurying/judging. This was indeed, again, a whole different thing. The last juror from Anchorage really slashed and burned and took out a lot of did not accept a lot of the entries, which, I mean, sometimes happens. That's just part of the game, you might say. This time, we had 2 jurors, Asa Freeman from Homer with the Bunnell Gallery, and her husband, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name right now, but he's associated with the Walker Arts Center in Minneapolis, which is a stellar organization. and facility. They were the co-jurors. They kept everything. So the whole building is full of great artwork. Also, a couple of years ago, the Art Center board decided to lower the age for acceptance into any art show to 16, lowered it to 16 from whatever it was. And the thought being, well, it's, are they competing with people who have a lot more experience? Is that fair either way? And various other comments. Well, so we thought, well, for the juried show, since we have a juror involved in it, there'll be a standard that would be met no matter what the age. That certainly proved to be true in this show. We do have some 16-year-olds who were brave enough to enter, and their work is great. So, excuse me, my tears. So, 6 o'clock tomorrow night, little music from Kent Peterson, and some goodies, and a lot of family and kids there tomorrow night too, I'm sure. So, that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Any questions of Ms. Nelson?
You've heard it all before.
Thank you for keeping us informed. We certainly appreciate it. Is there anybody else from the general public that would like to address the council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Everybody online, Julie? Okay, very good. Seeing none, we'll move to public hearings. First up, we have item D1, ordinance number 3317-2022, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the airport fund and appropriating funds in the airport snow removal equipment capital project fund for the purchase of snow removal equipment, attachments, and installation of a gate. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move to enact ordinance 3317-2022.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3317-2022? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation? Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'd like if Mr. Ostrander could explain a couple of things in the well, it's in the memo, and then there's something else in the whereases. Just for clarity, it's the second to last whereas. It talks about the FAA. We're waiting for the FAA to concur about non-competitive bidding, and then in the memo it said something about I think it was timing or something like that, but it was two different things are happening here, and council did an action, and I'm not sure when we did that.
Mr. Ostrander.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Naxted. So this ordinance appropriates the funds that are necessary to purchase and install the gate and also to buy the edge light cleaning attachment. At your last meeting, you passed a resolution that authorized me to sign this grant. Typically, both the authorization to sign the grant and the appropriation are in an ordinance, but because we're running up against the federal fiscal year, it required that we got the resolution authorizing me to sign the grant at the last meeting, September 21st, I believe it was, that allowed the grant to be completed before the end of the fiscal year. This is the second step, which does then appropriate those funds to purchase the edge light cleaning attachment and the gate. As far as the whereas, so we are seeking concurrence for a non-competitive bid to procure that edge light cleaning attachment. It's only available from one manufacturer. It's something that we occasionally do through the FAA. That's a separate thing that we are pursuing, and it doesn't require council action. Thank you.
Further discussion? Vice Mayor Glendenning.
Yeah, just thank you for the approach, and I like the idea that we'll have more on-site snow storage as a result of this, and it's a forward-looking view, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
Councilmember Baisden?
Yes.
Student Representative Thibodeau?
Yeah.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Glendenning?
Yes.
Councilmember Sonart?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxted?
Yes.
You have 7 yes votes. Ordinance 3317-2022 is enacted.
Thank you. Next up, we have item D2, resolution number 2022-70, authorizing changes to the payment terms of the Setnet Drive Street Improvement Special Assessment District, the Aliak, McCollum, Japonski Streets Improvement Special Assessment District, the Thompson Park, Beaver Creek, Alaska, Mac, Valhalla Heights, and Sunset Rim subdivisions, Street Improvement Special Assessment District, the South Ames Road LID Street Improvement District, and the James Street and Kiana Lane Improvement Special Assessment District in an effort to resolve the remaining delinquent accounts of the districts. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Basin.
Move to adopt resolution number 2022-70.
Second?
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2022-70?
I'd like to request unanimous consent.
Seeing and hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Discussion from council. Vice Mayor Glendening.
Yeah, would it be possible to have some backstory on this, just for the public, please?
Sure, Mr. Ostrander or Mr. Eubank.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Vice Mayor Glendening. I'll let Mr. Eubank run you through a summary of what this resolution accomplishes.
Mr. Eubank.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Glendening or Vice Mayor Glendening. What we have is we have 9 parcels with remaining special assessments on them. Those parcels reside in 5 different districts that we've done over time. At this point, all 9 of those parcels are in delinquency status. What the administration is attempting to do is to provide a path where we can resolve those delinquencies. Currently, the city's interest is protected by a lien filed on these pieces of property. So anytime that property transacts or financing is sought on those properties, our liens do pop up and create some issues for those people that are trying to do these things. What we're trying to do is we're trying to freeze the accounts. We're not forgiving any proposing to forgive any penalty or interest that is accrued. So as far as to date, the terms of the those payment plans or of each of these districts would remain intact as far as the current balance. What we're proposing is on a go-forward basis to freeze the accounts on 8 of these with the current balance, accumulate no more penalty and interest, provided the property owners will sign a confession of judgment with the city, and they will also enter into a payment plan for up to 10 years, monthly payment plan for up to 10 years to pay back those balances. If in the event they default or they don't make those payments, then the original payment terms of the district would remain in force, and we would just continue those collections. There is one parcel that's a bit unique in this, in that this parcel is a vacant piece of property, and currently the assessment, the accrued balance of the assessment is in excess of the value of the property. The property is actually in an estate right now, so it's trying to be distributed. What we're proposing with that parcel is to avoid a foreclosure process, which is likely the path that would happen with this, is we would accept the proceeds from the sale. They currently have a offer to purchase this piece of property. We would accept the proceeds from that sale after the payment of real estate commissions and $1,000 to the owners or to the estate as payment in full for the balance of the special assessment. And we would also forego trying to collect the remaining balance of the special assessment from the estate if they will agree to those terms. So really what we're trying to do is just clean up some delinquencies and give people, like I said, a path forward to be successful without forgiving penalty and interest that's currently been accrued.
Thank you, Mr. Eubank. Vice Mayor Glendening.
Thank you. That was a very clear explanation. Appreciate it.
Any further discussion? Unanimous consent. Oh, Councilmember Naxton.
I just thought I'd ask another question if I could through the city manager. Has the city contacted the 8 And I presume that this is something that they're generally agreeable to.
Mr. Eubank?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Knack said we have not reached out to the parties yet because we wanted to make sure that what the terms that were going to be set by council here. So no, I've discussed it with the city attorney, and he is going to be the one reaching out and negotiating the terms of these different payment plans. And really the only negotiation is potentially the term of repayment. It can't exceed 10 years, but if they requested a shorter term of repayment, we would certainly accept that. So,
Councilmember Winger?
I have one question. Were they going to be required to do a good faith program on when they join into the payment program? Or are we going to collect that up front for the first month just to make sure we're in good faith going forward?
Mr. Bloom, to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Winger. I mean, if that's what council as the body directs us to do, that's certainly what we'll do. It's not typically how we work our payment plans, but if that's what council wants us to do, we can make payment due at first payment due at time of signing.
That was my understanding in the conversation that we had, that a good faith payment would be required when they enter into that contract. So that was my understanding in that discussion.
So, Councilmember Winger, if I might, I certainly heard that discussion. I didn't know it was the wishes of the body. And if you want that, you can make that motion right now, and we'll certainly do it. It's not, I'm not.
Yes, I thought that was what we had agreed on. So I would like to make a motion to add that first month's payment would be due upon entering into the payment plan agreement with the city.
Second.
Discussion on the motion. I guess I do have a question, sort of how the timeline works. So when you reach out to them, would you be giving them a date specific that they would have to agree to the terms, Mr. Bloom?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. That's also something that, unless that's set by council at this, as a part of this, I would just give them, a reasonable amount of time, maybe, like a month to get the terms set up. Some of the payments are, at least one of the payments does require a fairly large payment plan. But I would generally give them about a month to get signed up before we would just move on. I mean, moving on is not, the idea is to get these accounts settled, so moving on would just be status quo, right? Unless council wants to direct administration or the legal department to take further action, which would essentially be foreclosing on our lien and evicting people.
Thank you. I guess that was the point of the question, is just to understand the timeline of when you reach out to them, that it wasn't, you need to agree to this right now, and then immediately that would trigger an immediate payment that might be difficult and, sort of maybe counter to what we're trying to do right now. So the purpose of that. Mr. Bloom?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Until somebody signed on to the agreement, the penalties and interest would continue to accrue. So it's to their benefit to do it as soon as possible. I guess to miss Councilmember Winger's point, if they said, I can't make the first payment right now, but I want to do this, I would just tell them, well, sign the agreement as soon as you can make the first payment. So, this is basically our path forward to try and get voluntary compliance. If people don't want this option, then there's not really anything we can do other than foreclose on the property.
And I totally understand that, and I think that's the goal of this body when we had that discussion. So I guess I guess my question would be, how do we navigate forward? Do we need to also make a motion to set a time frame where they have 60 days to enter into this, be notified and enter into it and make a payment? Because I know many programs that do payment arrangements do require an upfront, good faith payment. And they also will say, hey, I don't get my Social Security till the 5th of the month, and then those entities work around those times of what works for the individual to make sure that they are successful in the program. So I guess my question would be, do we need to postpone this so that we can recollect as a body and discuss out what time frame we would want?
Mr. Bloom?
Thank you, Councilmember Winger, through the mayor. I don't think it needs to be postponed. I mean, I would think that anytime somebody is willing to accept a payment plan is in the best interest of the city and the property owner. I mean, interest and penalties are just going to continue to accrue. They're not going to be, the longer they wait, the worse position they're going to be in. If you want this only to be open for a short period of time, then a time period would be set. But just remember that I guess if they're not participating in this payment plan, then things just remain status quo, and we potentially get in the situation that we're trying to avoid, which is the balances owed become more valuable than the property itself.
I get that. I'd like to request a 10-minute at ease so I can visit with the attorney.
Take a 10-minute at ease. Ms. Swinger?
I'd like to remove my motion.
Concur.
Concurrence of the second. Very good. Any further discussion on resolution number 2022-70? Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2022-70 is adopted. Next up, we have resolution number 2022-71, authorizing the city manager to execute a grant from the Alaska Department of Commerce, Community and Economic Development, Division of Community and Regional Affairs for the Kenai Bluff Stabilization Project. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Baisden.
Move to adopt resolution 2022-71.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2022-71? None. Mr. Ostrander, can you give us a little overview on this one? I'm sure you're going to be delighted to do that, I imagine. Mr. Ostrander.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So this resolution does give me the authority to execute a grant from the state of Alaska in the amount of $6.5 million, which is helping support our Kenai Bluff Stabilization Project. This was a grant that was included in this year's capital budget. We were successful in getting that in during the 2022 legislative session. This is a portion of the match money that the city is going to be responsible for the project. I did include a rather lengthy memo for council in here, and I thought you might appreciate just seeing the bumps in the road that we've seen over the last 6 years, and the distance that we've traveled in getting here today. There's also some additional money from the state from 2012 and 2015 that will be applied towards the match, as well as money that's included in the capital improvement program that makes up the total match that we feel that is going to be necessary for the project. We continue to look at other funding opportunities, and there's also some legislation at the federal level that could have a significant positive impact, I should say, to the city with this project. But this is the first step, and actually, just so council knows, this is similar to what we just had with the light clearing and gate project at the airport, in that this resolution authorizes me to sign this grant. As you'll see, there's also an ordinance that was introduced tonight that actually appropriates the money. So it's two separate pieces of legislation. This one authorizes me to execute the grant, and then the other one appropriates the money for the project.
Thank you, Mr. Ostrander. Vice Mayor Glendinning.
Yeah, thank you. So, in a nutshell, then, this advances the fulfillment of our obligation for the match funds. Is that what you're saying, and brings us closer, or are we there?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Vice Mayor Glendinning. So it gets us to where we think we will need to be. There's so much uncertainty still surrounding the total cost of the project. Even at 65% complete design documents, the estimate is between 19 and 42 million. The indications that we have is it will not exceed 35 million. If it does not exceed 35 million, we've got enough money when we include the $6.5 million to meet our match requirement. If it exceeds that, the match requirement would go up. But as I said, there's additional things that we're looking at, additional funding sources, as well as legislation at the federal level that could potentially help the city meet our match.
Okay, good to know you're front-running the potential increased obligation. Thank you.
Councilmember Baisden.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So for the city manager, so what's your best guess estimate then for just the public here, out to bid and possible construction? When would it start?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Baisden. Right now, the schedule is to go out for the construction bid on April 3rd of 2023. The 65% documents are completed. I talked to Mr. Curtin today. We're going through a process called ATR right now with the Corps of Engineers, which is Advanced Technical Review. I think I got that right. So they're going through an ATR process, which is a lengthy couple-month process, which is necessary to get to the 95% complete documents. But we should have complete documents early in 2023, and again, the schedule is for April 3rd release for construction. If we go out for construction, that will mean that the bid should be awarded within a couple of months of that bid release. So we're talking about early June of next year, we should be able to award a construction contract. Now, whether or not that means you're going to see rock piled on the beach next year or not, I can't say with certainty, but award of a construction contract in that hopefully early June timeframe is what we're looking at.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilman
Unanimous
Axton.
consent.
Very good. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2022-71 is adopted. Next up, we have resolution number 2022-72, authorizing a budget transfer on the general fund, decreasing city manager contingency, increasing non-departmental professional services, and authorizing a change to a purchase order to Larson Engineering and Design for the tower study. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you. I move to adopt Resolution 2022-72.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2022-72? Nobody online? Seeing none, wishing to be heard, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council, deliberation?
I would ask for
Councilmember
unanimous.
Basin. Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Vice Mayor Glendinning.
No objection. This encapsulates and repeats what we've already discussed regarding this tower, and this is just an understanding of what we've already agreed to, correct?
Mr. Oster.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Vice Mayor Glendinning. So we did a tower study to determine whether or not the tower was sufficient for what it was carrying and whether or not we could add additional items to the tower. That study indicated that the tower was sufficient and, in fact, was not overloaded, and there's additional items that could be added. The one component that wasn't looked at and that we need to look at further, and that this will allow us to do, is where the guy wires from the tower tie into the building itself. So we need to take a closer look at those, make sure that those attachment points on the building are sufficient to support the tower. So that's what this work will do.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2022-72 is adopted, which brings us to item F1, unfinished business, ordinance number 3316-2022, amending Kenai Municipal Code 14.20.150, conditional use permits to further clarify roles and responsibility of applicants, the planning director, and the planning commission in the conditional use process. There's a clerk's note here. At the September 21st, 2022 City Council meeting, this ordinance was postponed to this meeting. Motion to enact and a motion to amend are on the floor. But I would like to reopen this to public comment. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to this? Yes.
We take at some point in time, take a break?
Yes, right after public comment. Thank you. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to this? Or I see we got a couple planning and zoning commissioners here. Mr. Dothett?
Yes, Alex Dothett, 1104 Leeward Drive, Kenai, Alaska, Vice Chair on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I would just like to say that we worked on this a little bit. We went through the Planning and Zoning Commission process of it. It just clarifies a few things, and I like the biggest topic on this is that I'm in support of it. It really helps, I think, define for new commissioners what they're supposed to do and what they can do and how they're supposed to look into things with going forward. And mostly we're not trying to pick on anybody in particular or anything. It's just helping to add clarification to a few things, and the verbiages were changed. It didn't really change a whole lot of the meat and potatoes of the actual conditional use permitting process, but it helps add clarification for a lot of things in the processes and what the responsibilities are for the commissioners as far as moving forward on that. So that was.
Councilmember Axton.
Could you help clarify what the clarifications are that make it clearer? I'd like to know, because
well, we can go through them if you want, just kind of.
Well, in the ordinance, not the memo.
Well, let me see here.
But if there's a clarification, I'm not sure what it
Well, it just adds a few indications of where people are supposed to look and how we can go about referencing certain materials. Before I start going off here, so I guess if you want to go back to the memorandum where it specifically lays out the different amendments, That,
Actually, I'm looking at the ordinance,
I don't know.
because that's what the code is going to be, or whatever.
yeah, I was just going where you wanted to know the different clarification processes and what the amendments are, correct? And that's what we're talking about?
I'm just looking for what the clarifications are that's
Well,
in the ordinance.
Well, I would say, just briefly off the top of your head, Mr. Doth, that as a commissioner, so I guess I don't think we need to be like definitely super specific, because I think as the sponsor of this, Mr. Glenn Denning will probably be covering in detail, specific, detail, but I guess for your perspective of the planning and zoning commissioner and how you see this as a benefit.
It just helped with some of the verbiage, didn't go into enough detail, I didn't think, on some of the different aspects, and it helped by just changing some of the verbiage. For some people, it helped clarify what they can and can't do, or how to go about it. It was just a few, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of different changes, but really it didn't change a whole huge amount of it. I think it just helps emphasize a few things and added a little bit for clarification on a few people had with some of the different aspects of the ordinance. It wasn't a huge change. I don't see it being a huge change in how the ordinance functions, but added clarification on how, for direction, so to speak, I guess, for looking into things a little further and what we're supposed to be doing with that. And I can look at the amendments, I can kind of show that, or unless.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I just didn't have the ordinance in front of me directly. I was just looking at the amendments, that's all.
Right. Any further questions of Mr. Dothett? Vice Mayor Glenn?
Yeah, thank you. So what you're saying is this provides a more precise or cogent roadmap.
Yeah, it just was, it had a little bit of clarification.
Some
on a few
breadcrumbs where
aspects.
where items can be found.
Yeah, it helps guide you through the process a little bit. I know it adds more verbiage to an already confusing, some might say lengthy ordinance, but it's probably the most contested ordinances that we have, especially when it comes to planning and zoning, is the conditional use permits. And it's going to be a lengthy process. There's more stuff I think that in the long run we can do to help maybe unmuddle the waters a little bit and make it even better. But every time we can make some steps forward, I think it's a positive thing in this ordinance. It's just going to be a constantly changing issue with conditional use permits as we go and as things change throughout the city, and it's going to be a constantly changing document, I think, in the future. And I encourage people to look into it more, and just as it being on the commission for public and seeing these CUPs, it's really definitely a hot topic. And I think anytime we can help clarify or help with just the commissioners as they come on to have a little bit better roadmap to follow, it's a good thing. And that's kind of what went into this, the thinking on some of these different amendments to this.
Thank you.
Councilmember Weir?
Alex, I just want to say thank you for coming and testifying and giving clarification as you are vice chair. I think this, you have a lot of weight in this discussion, and I appreciate you coming forward and just clarifying that this helps you out and it's not to muddy the water, there's not big changes, but really just another tool in your guys' toolbox and more clarification going through this process that we see that we are conditional use permits is always a hot topic issue with you and your guys' commission. Again, I just thank you for coming in and testifying and letting us know that this will help you and be a tool to help you. And
Thank you. I think, and like I said, there's a lot to conditional use permits, and as I've been there, I've dug into them more and more and more, and it definitely is a growing issue, and I hope we can continue to look into it. I know it seems like the more verbiage you add sometimes can help think like you're muddying the waters, but hopefully sometimes you can just add an and or an is or you shall, and that shows emphasis on what we're supposed to be paying the most attention to. So that was it. Thank you.
Any further questions of Mr. Dolphin? Thank you. Is there anybody else from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3316-2022? Mr. Twait. Commissioner Twait. Chair Twait.
Jeff Twait, 1808 Juliana Drive. I was planning on just being a spectator with Alex back there, but since he got up, I'll just give a brief overview of kind of how I felt it played out when we battered it around back and forth. For the most part, I think, like Alex said, it doesn't change a lot. It still is pretty much an ordinance that kind of tells us where to go, how to go about doing our stuff, look at the land use table, things like that. My only concern, and I mentioned it to Mr. Bloom when we had our public hearing about it, was just the fact of where it says it must be supported by substantial evidence in city ordinances. And my only concern about that is I was thinking that might be a trigger, make it easier for somebody to file an appeal. Because some of the stuff that we do, I think if it was just had to be substantiated by code, the planner could do it. It would be a administrative deal, and it wouldn't even have to be a planning and zoning public hearing for a conditional use. But we gather a little bit of information due to public testimony coming in. Somebody has a concern. They've seen this already happening, whether it's a lodge or things of that nature. And so some of that comes into play when we do make a decision. And it's not specifically written in code. And so my only, I guess, task for you guys is to make sure that we don't get hung up in the language that it makes it easier for somebody to trigger an appeal. And like Mr. Bloom said, if somebody wants to appeal, they're going to appeal. So I don't know that maybe it is that big of a deal, but that was my biggest concern. I talked to Vice Mayor Glendenning about it, and we had a good discussion, I think, back and forth. But I kind of think when we moved it on to you guys, we figured, well, if there's any more clarifying to do, you guys can do the heavy lifting. So that's all I have.
Councilmember next then.
Put me on the spot now.
Well, you sat there, sir.
Okay, yeah, all right.
Yeah, no, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but I was wondering if what maybe you're looking for is more of rather than a code on what you should do, shouldn't do, can do, where you go, but perhaps something that's more like a policy generally. Gee, this is the process, this is where you fit in the process, and those encouragements and what to do. That would be something that a planner could review and all of that. This in code here, the next planners may not even read this particular part and understand it, but it could be written in a different form. I guess I'm reading more into it, but would that be more helpful in your years of being the chairman there for new planners or existing ones to have something like that?
Well, I will say that when I first became a commissioner, I went across the hall and had a good orientation with the planner, going through all the things that you have to go through. That was 5 or 6 planners ago probably by now, so I'm sure they all do it a little bit differently. And it does seem, I think, there was a few people, I think, that were slightly offended by some of the language, because it does seem a little bit remedial. It's not that complicated, but for a new person, some of this stuff will, I think, but again, if it's a good orientation, would probably accomplish the same thing. So we might be splitting hairs with that, but I think the bottom line is, I think what everybody's trying to do is make sure that we give the best decisions possible, and that there's backbone to it, and some findings, and especially if we're going against what the planner's recommendation was. Certainly if we're going to deny it, then I think findings are one of those things we really have to have, so the attorney has something to work with. If we're in agreement, then most of the stuff is already pretty well laid out when we start the conditional use process.
Just to follow up, I know you've gone to AML in the past. Was that helpful in any of this process?
Absolutely. And I don't know where that sits as far as, these last few years with COVID and everything, it kind of fell off, but there's definitely, even after I'd been a commissioner for quite a while, you still learn things there. Absolutely. There's nuggets of information that you can take back to your city for sure.
Any further questions of Mr. Twait? Oh, Vice Mayor Glendenning, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, and thank you for alluding to AML. I find those most beneficial. I took the new commission member, of course, twice because first grade was tough on me also. But I found it to be very, very interesting, and it challenges you to be a student of the code and understand the intent of what any CUP would be. In our current code, the intent of conditional use permit is recognized that there are some uses that may be compatible with designated principal uses in specific zoning districts, provided that certain conditions are met. The conditional use permit is intended to allow flexibility in considering the impact of proposed use on surrounding property and application of controls and safeguard to assure that the proposed use will be compatible with the surroundings. The Commission may permit this type of use if the conditions and requirements listed in this chapter are met. The allowed uses are listed in the land use table. Before a conditional use permit may be granted, the procedure specified in this chapter must be followed. This is already code, and all we are doing, if you want to be trite about it, is wash, rinse, repeat, and give guidance and allow people to think about what they're doing and understand that ultimately the Commission has the power to grant or deny. It just has to be reasoned or have some idea. You just can't simply say, I don't like it. Yeah, you have to have something, some reasoning out there. And I know in my commission experience, we had a situation with a horse, and I fell short in my obligation, and that's what triggered my thought process. And you're familiar with that too. And now we take adjudicative recess, and we have to postpone it. We'll discuss it, and we'll work it out. And our land use table is lengthy and sometimes contradictory. But I think if we are good students, we can go through and we can find the correct application of code and the desire of the community. Are you agreeing with that?
I would agree with you. I
Thank
think,
you.
like you said, I think we're all trying to
We're trying to have a
make the
better
best decisions
product
we
and
can.
not limit anybody's authority or presentation ability. It's an invitation to consideration and deliberation of the bodies. And thank you.
Yeah, and like I said, and like I said, maybe I got fixated on the fact that it says must be based on that, because that to me seems like that if to the person that maybe had their permit denied, if they just look that far only, then they go, I'm going to go run down and file an appeal. So again, that's maybe more me than anyone else.
Councilmember Sonner.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Mr. Twait, thank you for speaking tonight. Simple question. In your opinion, will this ordinance help your commission to be better, and will it help future commissioners?
I don't think it will hurt, necessarily. Like I said, I was kind of fixated on this one aspect of it. But I think, as Councilmember Nax had said, it could be handled through a policy thing and say, okay, your training is going to show you that if this is the thing, here's where you go look at it, and things like that. So, again, I'm not against this on its entirety. I was kind of fixated on some of the language, but I think it could for most people, but I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Weyer.
I have a question on, you just mentioned training. So a new commissioner gets on, when do they get training? What type of training, and how long do they get help and training for, so that they would be able to navigate all of this without AML?
I don't know the answer to that. I know when I got mine, it was individually. I went into the conference room there and took it with, I think, maybe one other commissioner that was new at the time. So I don't know how new ones, if they get individual training or not. We have had some work sessions. The clerk's given us some this last year, I believe. So we get a good overview of it. And then, of course, everybody, you're willing to, if you want to come forward and ask people, there's there, but a lot of them don't do that.
I just want to make sure I've got that right. So if we added this into policy for training, there's no guarantee that there is training. You said it was a one-on-one, that there isn't an actual training for new people. So if we put this into policy, there's nothing stating that they would get that training.
I would defer to the clerk on that probably. But yeah, like I said, when I did it, it was one-on-one. That was 20 years ago. So I know now we did have a work session that was kind of covering Robert's rules and all those things in this last year. So.
One more. So for the training was more Robert's rules, policies, procedures,
No,
how meetings go, but not the actual in and outs of
Well, I have to,
zones,
I have to
rules,
admit I
ordinances.
wasn't there for it, so maybe the clerk could answer that one.
Okay, so I'll refer to Shelley, I guess. Was the training, did it cover zoning, rules, these items, or was it just Robert's Rules of Orders? This is how the process goes.
Thank you. And through the mayor, I'm sorry, that was a year ago, and yesterday was an election. The attorney was with us, and I do believe that we did cover some of the zoning code, but my portion of the training that I conducted was Robert's Rules of Orders and Open Meetings Act with the attorney, and we did do a portion on zoning code.
Mr. Bloom?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. If I may, yeah, we covered, make conditional use permits, making findings, the ability to go into adjudicatory session to discuss it. I recommended that that's what the body do. We also talked about, being able to postpone decisions if not enough information was there, and making findings, and that it's the commission that's responsible for the findings, not the planner necessarily, that the planner provides proposed findings, but ultimately those findings need to be the commission's findings.
Further questions of Mr. Twait? Vice Mayor Glendon?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. We've served together on the Planning Zoning Commission, and I recall AML training, and I also recall certain training I had with the attorney and the clerk, and it involved the responsibility that we had to make decisions not based on emotion or the ebb and flow of the public comment, but actually that look at our land use and our ordinance and our past practices. And we also have the conditions of interpretation from our ability to go into other than code. And it's a very generous proposition. We just have to find the verbiage and the words to explain to the applicant and to the public what we are doing. But I would say that the duties and powers of the commission, as in code now, are to interpret the provisions of the Kenai Zoning Code and make determinations when requested by the administrative official. Okay, so we have a duty to listen to him, and we should listen to him. We don't have to agree with him. We don't have to accept. We don't have to defer. I think that's the word now. But he has a duty, or that person has a duty to.
Or she, yes.
That's right. That person. I'm just saying, person. That person has a duty to give the best explanation of the situation, of the application as submitted by the applicant, and the existing code and practices. Also in here it says that the applicant has a duty to respond to questions from the commission, and as such they have to be properly schooled and understand what they're asking for and what the effects of their application is. So thank you.
Councilmember Naxton.
Mr. Twait, everything that you're agreeing with is already in code, correct?
I believe it is, yeah.
Any further questions of Mr. Twait? Thank you, Commissioner Twait. Anybody else from the oh, sorry.
So sorry, Mayor.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Dothett looked like he wanted to add to this. Could he come back up to the podium?
Sure.
Alex Dothett, I'm back. Got my address earlier. Just on the comments of the training, I know we've had an influx of planning and zoning staff, and I know when I first started, it was like show up to a meeting and figure it out. I really didn't get much any kind of training for quite some time, and the training that they're speaking of was the first real formal training that I had, and it was a huge help. And I would just like to say, hopefully, I got, the training I got was, well, there's a conditional use permit. I better look it up online. How do I read this ordinance and what is it telling me to do? And figure it out and then kind of muddle through it. And when I was there, when the planning director would come up and he recommends, or, you know, they, in black and white, they're recommending everything. I took that with a lot more of, okay, well, they're in the place of authority. They've got a degree in this and a lot of training more than me. I guess I'll take their word that they're recommending it. And so it meets the codes. And so I just go ahead and go with that. After getting more of the training, the longer I was on there, I was reading, it's more discretionary and it's based on the commission's findings, and you can find stuff that might not necessarily go with what was found in the original application or recommended from the planning director. And basically, I just wanted to say that I'm hoping that the training that we received on Robbins rules and the judiciary sessions and be able to stop and go and talk other than being out in front of the public and ask questions and find stuff, hopefully those trainings can be more done earlier on before a commissioner just gets appointed and stuck up there and good luck and figure it out. And I really, this would have helped me when I was just trying to figure it out. A few little key words in here, and that's where I was coming from, is I was kind of trying to figure out and self-taught, oh, okay, so it's underneath there, oh, land use table, I should probably look up this land use table and figure out what that is. Whereas if we'd had the training like you spoke of, right off the bat, I think it would help immensely. So hopefully we can get better training sooner or earlier on in the process for new commissioners, and they won't have to be quite as much self-taught. And that's where I was coming from when we looked at this ordinance, is when you're trying to read it and pick it out, it kind of really picked out some of the things like findings. Findings is one of those things I didn't really understand when I first started, and then how those come about and what you're supposed to do with those. And then that's where I was at with, in response to Mr. Councilmember Connected's comments about training, is that there was a definite lack of it with new ones. And I think the training that we had later on, many months after I'd been on the commission, was extremely helpful, and it changed my whole outlook on things.
And just so you know, we've paid for planning and zoning commissioners to go to AML to have that training. Certainly training in-house here would help. I know COVID was an issue when,
and that's where
about the time you were at, I think added to that. So maybe a little bit of an oversight on our part. But I guess if in your opinion, if a new commissioner came on board with a orientation packet, one-on-one, even one-on-one training, let's say, because sometimes it doesn't sync with when they start their duty on the commission. Does this replace the training that you're suggesting?
I don't think you're going to replace it with just a few
Okay,
extra
so
verbiage
that being said,
of any
would it work in reverse? Would it be necessary if they had the training?
I think it would back up both. I think it could reiterate some of the key points that you're going to see in your training and putting it down in black and white here. I think they could benefit both in both ways by feeding off of each other for sure. I mean, we're not adding a huge amount to this. It's a line here, a line there that just adds in some of the stuff that you would receive in your training to clarify that. And I just want to reiterate that with the training earlier on with staff, and it was great with the new staff we've had. When we did receive that training, it was huge to have that with a sit down with the city attorney and the clerk to be able to have that training early on. Reiterated a lot of the points that we're putting into this. So I know training had come up, and I just was one of the things I really want to make sure that we know that hopefully with going on with all the commissions, especially with planning and zoning, which is a huge learning curve to jump into that without a lot of training, was difficult, and I think we can do better on that. So.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Any further questions? Is there anybody else from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3316-2022? Anybody online? Seeing, hearing none, we'll take a 10-minute at ease. back on the record. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move to withdraw my motion.
Who was the second on that, Ms. Sainer?
Councilmember Petty.
I concur.
So we have withdrawal of the motion to amend, concurrence of the second. We have the main motion before us. Councilmember Glendening, or Vice Mayor Glendening.
With the withdrawal, where does this leave us? We were in the process.
Well, but what it leads to is just essentially, there was a motion to approve and then a motion to amend. The motion to amend was withdrawn, so the motion to approve is where we're at.
Okay.
I'd call for the vote.
Councilmember Naxton. I
don't think we are done discussing it.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
So who wants to lead off here? Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. In the packet, I do have a number of amendments, and of course, I just withdrew one. But the council here has had the last 2 weeks plus about half a week before that to review those. So you can see the particular places throughout the changes that I have some concerns about, and the purpose of the ordinance, as I understand from testimony last meeting, and in the ordinance itself, it has to do with appeals, and the public gets to appeal no matter how good the findings may be or how poor or whatever it might be, and it's something that we want the public to have that ability, even if it makes us work a little bit harder as a Board of Adjustment. It's just the way the process is. So nothing we're going to do, unless we change the code that says you can't appeal conditional use permit or something like that, then we'll continue to have appeals. And I believe that some of the changes to the code may not do too much. Some of them certainly make it more ambiguous, where it was clearer. And some of it also implies that really that the planning and zoning has to make their own findings based on code and the land use tables. And it leaves it at that, where before certainly would have been those two things plus whatever they might come up with as far as conditions. And we want them to be able to free think and do that depending on what the situation is. And I guess my opinion is basically if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's really no reason to change the code. I think that from what we heard from our two planners here tonight, and what I know from being a planner for a number of years is, training is where it's at. Reading the code, examining what's being brought forth to you, and just getting other outside training is important, and perhaps maybe something from our new planning director who is here would be kind of an outline for a packet for new planners, basically kind of outlining what their roles and responsibilities might be. But that would be good. That would be constructive. That would build something. In talking with our attorney, what some of the words actually mean and whatnot, it actually, maybe I'm repeating myself, but does add some ambiguity and may make it more difficult for the attorney to defend the actions of the planning and zoning in the future. So I will be not supporting this ordinance, and I'm not going to make the motion, move the amendments I have there, unless somebody else here would like to do that.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councilmember Winger.
I'll be in support of this ordinance. I think we heard that we need to better our training, and we have many commissioners that come in and don't receive training, and relying on outside source for training or once a year training that we just started doing. I don't feel will give them quite the tools. I do agree that we should have some sort of outline, that a packet that is given to the commissioners when they get on so that they can start to navigate this, as well as some one-on-one help navigating through this. But as far as I disagree with Councilmember Naxted's comment that this would go back to training, because as we heard, there has been a lack of training, and I will be supporting this. We did have some major changes to the conditional use permits by our previous Vice Mayor Malloy, and I believe this is cleaning up some of those items as well. So this isn't the first time this body in the last year has looked at the conditional use permit process. We made quite a few changes. I don't necessarily think all changes that we made a year ago were correct changes, and there's a lot of cleaning up that we need to continue to do, and this is a step in the right direction.
Councilmember Petty.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. When this was first brought up for us, Mr. Glendinning, or Vice Chair Glendinning, asked for this to be postponed so that the Planning and Zoning could have an opportunity to look at that and give us their insight. However, having listened to the Planning and Zoning when they were taking a look at this, the substitute liaison, Mr. Glendinning, participated almost as if he was a Planning and Zoning Commissioner, and in some of his testimony, he was using the word "we," indicating that the council was in agreement with this. And so I don't feel like that the Planning and Zoning Commission had the opportunity to have an unbiased point of view to give us their recommendation. So what I'm hearing here tonight is the lack of instruction, or more structured instruction, so that they could have a greater understanding, and this ordinance does not address that. So I won't be supporting this ordinance tonight.
Vice Mayor Glendinning.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, as the proposer of the ordinance, I was allowed to testify and explain and answer questions. That's the reason for my comments during the commission meeting. You yourself have done so. Former Vice Mayor Malloy has done so. It's been the obligation of the proposer of an ordinance to give testimony, and which I did. Thank you.
Further discussion, Councilmember Basin.
Thank you, Mayor. So in my previous positions, I remember going into the borough and could not understand what planning did. And once you understand what planning does and how they have their hands wrapped around everything, whether it's at the borough or at the city level, they make a lot of decisions. I know Mr. Glendinning's been involved with planning and zoning for a while. Alex Dothett and Jeff Twait, basically, one of them said that this will help. The other one said it wouldn't hurt. And I'll be the first to admit that planning and zoning is difficult, and I'll think that basically if any one of us was to come to make changes to this, we could all probably make comments to it. I don't think anybody here is trying to make it harder. I think we're trying to make it better. I hope this makes it better, and I'll support it just for that reason.
Further discussion, Councilmember Sonart.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I agree with Councilmember Naxted that there's nothing we can put into writing that's going to dissuade future appeals. I totally agree with that. People who want to appeal are going to appeal, no matter what we have in code, no matter what we have written down in ordinances. I did hear tonight that Commissioner Dothett supports this and feels like this would be a good backup to the training that the new commissioners are now receiving, thanks to our new clerk, and from admin also, which is good. That training has improved recently, which is important because canvassing is going to be taking place next Tuesday to finish up the election. And I mean, just looking at mathematical probability, we're looking at least one vacancy on planning and zoning, possibly two. So with new people coming in, to fill a position or possibly two positions. It would be nice to have something, some sideboards put on or something shored up a little bit to help the commission move forward with a new member or new members. That's kind of where my line of thinking is. So I will be in support of this.
Further discussion? I guess where I'm at with it is when I read the title of it, it says amending Kenai Municipal Code Section 14.2.150 conditional use permits to further clarify roles and responsibility of applicants, the planning director and planning commission. I know this was fleshed out with the help of the city attorney. I mean, we didn't have our new planning director when this was put together. I'm not a planning director. I would be interested in and I don't want to put her on the spot, believe me, about how this would be affecting, what she would consider good legislation for clarifying her role, because it specifically says that it would be germane to her new position. But as I go through this, one of the things I see is like right away under 14.20.150, the first part, which is the First Amendment, the grant, denial, modification, or revocation of a conditional use permit is discretionary, but must be based on findings supported by substantial evidence in city ordinances. And there was this sort of theme throughout that, requiring substantial, I see substantial evidence, so on and so forth, applicable evidentiary support. And then when you go down further to, that's not in here, is under burden of proof, which is sort of the crux of the conditional use permit, or what's required, the burden of proof, and what's required to move that forward. And you read that, the applicant for a conditional use permit has the burden to show by substantial evidence the 6 criteria. And then the next line, substantial evidence is such relevant evidence a reasonable mind might accept as adequate to support a conclusion. So it sort of fleshes out in that burden of proof, kind of what is almost redundant through this other part. So, and then it goes on to list these, criteria that are required. What I'm hearing, and then even the next under the staff report, which is new language, would be evidentiary findings by the planning director or designee shall be considered. But the line before that is the commission may consider the recommendations of the planning director or designee, but shall accord it no difference. So we have the role of the planning director is to advise and give recommendations to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Planning and Zoning Commission is to consider that, and it says evidentiary findings, which I'm sure that would be in the staff report, that would be conveyed to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that's what they would base their decision on. They're the ones, the planning director is the one providing all of the evidence or justification from the permittee, and presumably has worked with the permittee through the process to get the relevant information. So I don't know, in my mind, I think what I heard from thank you for showing up and testifying, for our planning and zoning commissioners, our chair and vice chair, is that it's almost to the point of a training issue, and if that's an issue, and I agree to the point that we did have, especially with Mr. Dothert when he came on board with COVID, and we've been since I've been on council, we've paid for commissioners to go to the AML training, and certainly Scott and our previous clerks have done training with the commissioners, and I was just talking to Shelley about there's actually planning commissioner or planning workshops they have in Anchorage that we could send folks to, which I'm all for. We should spend that money to do that. It's an important position. It's an important role. Does this make that, more or less relevant? I don't know. I don't think that, in my mind, that adding this in would make any difference to, you guys have been through it, so you're ahead of the curve a little bit. But taking someone, as Alex pointed out, and putting them in that position and saying, okay, here you go with no training at all. Does this language change make that better? I don't necessarily believe it does, because I think it's redundant. So with that, I did go through pretty thoroughly on this to see if there was anything that was specific to, making these commissioners better or more prepared. And I don't think it definitely doesn't take the place of the training. And in other ways, I think just is a matter of, I think muddying the waters a little bit. So with that, my comments, Vice Mayor Glendenning.
Yeah, I have a question that I was asked before of the attorney. The term deference, I take it to mean that it's a superiority of discussion or the position. We are not going to accord deference to the Planning Commission, but we're going to listen to them. Is this correct, Mr. Bloom?
Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Vice Mayor Glendenning, I'm not sure what you mean. You said we're not going, can you restate the question?
Okay, define the term deference. In other words, I took it to mean just a gentlemanly, a general accordance that we would listen to a position by the planning director politely. Okay, but in the legal terms, deference has a different meaning. Okay.
Are you asking me for the legal definition of deference?
Yes.
Okay, so in the context of, for example, the Planning Commission and the planner, if the planner had deference, that would mean that the Planning Commission would have to listen to the planner unless they found specific reasons why not to. For example, if the planner had deference, there's not always a right and a wrong answer in these planning decisions, right? There can be better or worse answers and equal answers. I mean, we're looking at the comprehensive code. That's not necessarily objective. There's a lot of subjective goals in the comprehensive plan. If the Planning Commission were to accord deference to the planner, basically, as long as the planner wasn't out in right field, the planner's decision would stand. So even if the Planning Commission thought there was a different answer, the planner's decision would hold. Deference also comes in, for example, when the City Council acts as the Board of Adjustment. It does not accord the decision of the Planning Commission any deference. It's a de novo hearing. They start again. They make their own decision, almost ignoring what the Planning Commission did. Now, when the Commission's decision, when the Board of Adjustment's decision, if that were to be appealed to a court, the court would give deference to the Board of Adjustment. So the court wouldn't review the Board of Adjustment's decision independently. They would just verify that the Board of Adjustment's decision was reasonable and supported by the substantial evidence. Same with, I guess, getting back to the planner. Right now, the Commission doesn't give the planner any deference. The planner makes a recommendation to the Commission, and the Commission can do whatever it wants with it. It can completely ignore it or adopt it if it agrees with it, with the recommendation by the planner.
Or the word of art, consider.
Consider means that the planner is getting deference. So, for example, the code change in here says that the planner is going to make a recommendation, and we discussed this, but that recommendation by the planner is not given any deference by the Commission. The Commission is making an independent decision. But what we discussed is, for example, say the planner, one of the conditions is that there's adequate public facilities. So say the planner said there is water and sewer to the property. and it was determined during the hearing, because we have a hearing where evidence is presented, that there wasn't actually water and sewer to the property. So because the proposed change that you have says that they have to consider it, the planning commission ideally would address it and say, even though the planner said that there was water and sewer to the property, new evidence has been presented that clearly shows that there isn't. So that would be they considered it, but didn't adopt it or agree with it. Yep.
Further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
Councilmember Baisden?
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel?
No.
Vice Mayor Glendenning?
Yes.
Councilmember Sonart?
Yes.
Councilmember Nackstead?
No.
Councilmember Petty?
No.
You have 4 yes and 3 no votes. Ordinance number 3316, 2022 is enacted.
Thank you. Next up, we have item F2, resolution number 2022-64, approving the renewal of a lease utilizing a non-standard lease form on airport reserve lands between the City of Kenai and the Federal Aviation Administration for the automated flight service station and satellite communication network facilities on Lot 7A-1 FPO subdivision number 5. And there is a clerk's note at the September 21st, 2022 City Council meeting. This resolution was postponed to this meeting. A motion to adopt is on the floor. Would also note that there is a memo on our laydown requesting an additional postponement. And with that, I'll open for additional public hearing. Is there anybody here that would like to speak to resolution number 2022-64? Seeing nobody here or online, we'll bring back Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move to postpone Resolution 2022-64 to the October 19th council meeting.
Second, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the resolution number 2022-64 is postponed. That brings us to item G6, discussion. This was something that was added, which would be the city manager job description. So as you, excuse me? Oh, sorry. So there's a few moving parts to this. As you all know, Mr. Ostrander has forwarded his intent to not renew his contract for city manager, as city manager for the city of Kenai. So we'll have to obviously go through the process of starting to recruit a new city manager. At the same time, we find ourselves going through a new election with new members that'll be seated on the body. At least one new member. The unofficial election results are included in our packet as a laydown, and we have canvassing that'll be taking place next week, and then certification on our next meeting in October. So we've got a little bit of time here that I would like to start moving this forward, and my intention was to utilize our employee subcommittee, which includes myself, Vice Mayor Glendenning, and Mr. Baisden, to go through, and the reason for that is to avoid the need for public notice for the whole body to meet. The idea was to work with the Human Resources Director to flesh out the job description for the new city manager and bring that to this body at our next meeting for approval, and then we can get started with the recruitment process to actually put out and solicit applicants. And that's my plan. I just wanted we need a starting point. We got some time here. I think it's pertinent that we have any new members of the body be part of the discussion of moving forward with the with the recruitment, but I think this is something that we could handle internally through our subcommittee to get this fleshed out to the point where we're basically kind of getting a step in the game, because really our first meeting with the new members would be on November 1st, or the first meeting in November, and that only leaves us 2 months because Mr. Ostrander's contract expires on January 9th rather, and then there's AML in the middle of December, so we're kind of on a compressed timeline, and that was my thoughts. Well, like I said, it's a discussion item, and I'd like to hear any other thoughts, Mr. Basin.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So after reading your memo, I guess my only concern is that there's no doubt the clock will tick, and it'll tick by quick, and anything that we do, we're always going to feel like we don't have enough time for whoever we bring in here to be with the city manager. And I guess my only comment would be is that while we work on the job description, and of course we have all these changes taking place, I'd like to see this current job description be used. Go ahead and open the position, give direction to administration, have HR open and advertise the position until filled. If in the near future we make changes to it, any applicants that we interview, we could then present the new changes if we had any changes to it. But even the 2-week window, because of holidays and everything else that you talked about, this time window that we have for whoever we bring in here to spend with City Manager Ostrander is going to be so short. I just don't want us to lose any time if we don't have to.
Well, if that's the case, and I don't have any objection to that. I'm just trying to avoid special meetings and things like that of the whole body. I guess I think I would want to hear from the rest of the body, or maybe even a motion to allow the subcommittee to follow that course, and they would be behind, because there are things we have to add to that, like the salary range, and things like that, to the description. Qualifications, minimum qualifications and things like that, which, that was sort of the intent, was to flesh that out, bring it up put it in our packet, and then act on it on their next meeting. So I know our HR director isn't here, unfortunately, because I would like to, know the timeline, but I don't, and no objection to that other than I'd like to have the consent of the rest of the body to move forward with that plan. Mr. Basin.
If I could just follow up, yeah, so the way I see it playing out is that the body is still going to be the overall, going to have to consent to any changes that take place. It would just allow us to give the administration, HR is going to know what the numbers are out there. They've got a current job description, and I doubt if there's any huge changes that have to take place with it. I would just like to use the time as soon as possible to get it out there so we can start getting people who are interested in it. I think that works to our advantage.
Mr. Naxton.
Yeah, I believe I agree with Councilmember Baisden on the approach, having gone through this city manager job description before we hired Mr. Ostrander. But I would make a motion that we put the supervisory subcommittee to work. We haven't done anything this year, and reviewing this, and bring back a revised one at our next meeting. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Councilmember Winger, was that a motion?
It was a motion.
Okay, that motion's on the floor. Yes.
That was second.
Councilmember Winger.
I agree with Mr. Baisden in getting this opened, better than being 2 weeks behind in our recruitment efforts. And so that we, as he noted, we're going to be coming into holidays. It'd be very beneficial to have this onboarding city manager get to work with Mr. Ostrander. And I would have concerns that between holidays and Mr. Ostrander's leaves, that we wouldn't have that adequate time. So I would like to speed this up and get this opened up as soon as possible. And I trust the members of this board to bring us back some solid job descriptions or pay scale.
Vice Mayor Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I agree with Councilor Baisden. I too was involved in a transition, coming on board as a counselor during the transition from the former city manager to the current city manager. We had open discussions, open understandings. I believe the transition was largely seamless. There was plenty of opportunity to have instruction and communication from the outgoing city manager to the potentially the new city manager, and there's no reason why we cannot go forward as suggested by this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sonart.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So if I'm understanding this correctly, okay, let me back up first. Yes, I agree we need to move forward to utilize these 2 weeks. So would HR then be they'd have to put some kind of job description out there. So would they be using the 2016 job description that was used previously?
Well, what I'm understanding is that we would have the ability to amend. Is that correct, Mr. Basin? If we met, our employee subcommittee met with our human resources department, listened to her input, and then put that out as the basic job description.
Point of order. I don't think we're talking about that yet. I think we're talking about the subcommittee doing its job and bringing it back, and perhaps that's a second motion that we'll hear is what we're going to do.
Well, what I guess I'm hearing is that we wanted to send this out. I think that speaks to or Councilmember Sonart's question, is whether we're taking this one from 2016 and putting it out there as the, general or the job description for the recruitment. Was that your intention,
That was my
Mr.
thought,
Basin?
because if we're moving forward to utilize these 2 weeks, we have to use what's already there. And my thought would be maybe just put a little asterisk on the bottom and have the HR person right underneath that job description that's being used. 2022 job modifications or job description is currently under modification. And just add that in so that it states what we're doing. I mean, just food for thought.
Mayor Gabriel.
Yes, Mr. Bloom,
Thank
please.
you. I don't mean to speak for the city clerk, and the city manager might be able to help me, but I think what the city clerk will need before she advertises, I don't know if you want to approve the recruitment announcement or trust the HR director to do that, but I think most importantly, what we don't know is questions like salary. Do we just want to say DOE, or do you want to put a range in there? I think those are decisions that council needs to make with our HR. So I don't know if our HR department has enough information to advertise tomorrow without some decisions by council.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, just to add to what Mr. Bloom said, the 2 primary things that the HR director is going to need is the salary range and then minimum qualifications. I think that council should at least consider the minimum qualifications at tonight's meeting. Any other part of the job description could be modified, but what I'm confident the HR director would not want to do is put out a recruitment with minimum qualifications on there and then modify that after the fact, because you might have people that are in the process of applying, and then if you change the minimum qualifications, they may not qualify. So I'd want you to look at the minimum qualifications. And then as far as the salary goes, I think the supervisory subcommittee could work with the HR director, even through email tomorrow or by Friday anyways, to get that salary range, what you want posted on the recruitment, get that established that the rest of council is comfortable with the subcommittee doing that work. And then those are the 2 things that she really needs to get the recruitment out by Friday of this week.
And that's what my whole point is. I would like to at least have a cursory meeting with her to make sure that she needs what she has. But if you guys, I think my hope was the intent of the motion was to have us flesh that out so we can get that out on the street. But as of right now, we have, and certainly be interested in hearing if there's an idea that we can throw out for the pay scale that, I wouldn't have any objection to that coming from the body right now, but I don't, you know, that's something that should be included. Councilmember Winger.
In the budget, is this position a classified range? And if so, would that be a good starting point? So if it's a class 25, 28, there's no, Scott's shaking his head. So I would be comfortable with a DOE while the subcommittee works on the modifications and brings it back. So if we wanted to advertise this at DOE while we work on the exact numbers, the worst that's going to happen is an applicant pulls their application because it's not within their satisfaction of range, or maybe it'll draw more applicants after we come forth. But it'd be important to get this out and out sooner than later.
Further discussion. So the motion on the floor, could you restate the motion, Mr. Basin? Or maybe Ms. Sainer? Huh?
The motion.
Oh,
on,
Henry's. Oh, I thought, sorry, you were the second.
The motion on the floor was to direct the subcommittee to begin working on job description revisions.
Cleaned it up a little. Thank you.
Would you like to add, amend the motion to add and include a DOE clause for salary range? So that's kind of.
I amend my motion to include the abbreviation as a D.
Depending on experience, yeah.
Yeah, depending on experience clause.
For pay scale.
For pay scale, thank you.
Second.
Request
Okay.
unanimous consent.
Thank you.
Just one question. After the subcommittee meets, council gets to review the decision, or they accept what we have decided?
I guess my question would be to Mr. Bloom, can we put it out there as an advisory, or would we have to call a meeting? Is it something we can give to the clerk that says that this is what we came up with, or would we have to call a special meeting?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I guess there's more than one way to skin this cat. I mean, it could be that the subcommittee meets and brings its recommendation back to council to approve, or it could be decided by council right now that the subcommittee meets, and I have to think about Open Meetings Act. I guess they couldn't email and get. So I think you would either have to give authority to the subcommittee to make the decision, or ask the subcommittee, or the subcommittee would bring it back to council.
And I think that's the motion on the floor, is to give us the authority. Is that correct? Oh.
I apologize. The secondary motion, was that approved unanimously, adding the DOE?
Well, we were still discussing, but there was
Okay.
unanimous consent was requested. Was there any objection? Yeah,
Depending on experience.
okay.
Okay.
So that's as amended.
So yes, we're back to the primary motion as amended, which is the subcommittee working on the job description.
Without further council approval.
That was not in the original motion. That would be up to the
So that
maker
needs
and
to
the
be
secretary.
clarified.
Without further council approval.
Second.
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. There's the objection. So basically, what I understand about this is that if is a yes vote on this motion allows the subcommittee to review the minimum qualifications and approve that for advertisement with a clause of for the salary range of depending on experience. Mr. Bloom.
Thank you. I just have one more clarification question so we know where we're going. Does council just want our HR person to do the recruitment announcement by herself, or have the subcommittee approve it?
I would say have the subcommittee approve it.
Would that have to be part of the motion?
Is that a motion?
I'll second that, unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? That motion carries. So we have the main motion as amended, correct?
Yes.
I feel comfortable agreeing with this, and that, you know, the three of you, I do trust, and the price range, it's going to be a range. It's not going to be a real narrow range, my experience on that. So you're gonna know where those numbers are, and that's fine. And even if a high number is a little high, doesn't mean that we're gonna go there in the end, and the low number may be kind of low as far as that goes. The minimum qualifications, which I did re-review at Sanders' suggestion, I don't have any issue with what's there right now. There's only 5 of them, and so yeah, I'm supporting of this.
Councilmember Basin.
Thank you, Mayor. And I agree. I read through the minimum qualifications. I think the goal here is to get it out there. We've got minimum qualifications. We can set the salary range, and of course, nothing's going to take place until we bring all of it back here with once it's opened up and we're dealing with this. Just gets it out there quicker, so we have time to work on it as a body. I hope the council's comfortable with us just being able to start that process quickly. It's going to be a big deal quickly for us.
And I might just add to that, I know we'll be working with our HR director. She's very good, very thorough. I feel comfortable doing this, and would just point out that if there were specific issues that would require the input of the rest of the council, that we would seek Mr. Bloom's advice and call for a special meeting or something along those lines if that would be required. Any further discussion on the motion as amended? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Baisden?
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Glendenning?
Yes.
Councilmember Sonert?
Yes.
Councilmember Nackstead?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
The motion as amended is approved.
Thank you. And since there's no public notice required for us to meet, we'll reach out or have the clerk reach out, and we'll set up a time to meet with our human resources director. Okay. Thank you. Next up, commission committee reports. Council on Aging.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Council on Aging had a work session on the 29th of September. It was kind of long, actually, for them, and it was about 2.5 hours long, actually. And what they were discussing are goals and objectives for the senior centers down there. And what Kathy, the director, brought forward in kind of Googling other goals and objectives, and was one from Verona Senior Center in Wisconsin. And there was quite a number of goals, potential. They varied from classes and targeting mind and body, and enhance expanding case management services, develop a mentoring program, and a whole lot more. And then there were some within things and within that, but they pared down to what they thought they might want, and they'll have another work session eventually where they'll go over those in some more detail, perhaps before the end of the year. But it was a very productive meeting, and their next regular meeting is October 13th, next week.
Thank you. Airport Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. The next Airport Commission meeting is October 13th at 6 o'clock.
Thank you. Harbor Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. There was no meeting in October, and the next meeting will be November the 7th. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Petty. Parks and Recreation Commission.
Parks and Recs will be meeting tomorrow in chambers at 6 o'clock.
Thank you. Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. The September 28th meeting was not held due to lack of agenda items. The next scheduled meeting is October the 12th.
Thank you. Beautification Committee.
Thank you. Beautification Committee has a big weekend coming up. This Saturday is the annual Pumpkin Festival, starting at 12 noon until 3 o'clock at Millennium Square. There will be hay rides and free apple cider, a petting zoo, face painting, pumpkin painting, and I heard that there's supposed to be free pumpkins. Hopefully to every child, but possibly maybe to each family. But I don't have an update on the free pumpkins.
How old does the kid have to be?
Kid at heart. Thank you.
And hopefully we get some nice weather. I know last year when we did it was absolutely gorgeous that day, so hopefully we can get that, yeah. Mini Grant Steering Committee, we do have an application that was referenced by Ms. Wackler here this evening. We have not scheduled a meeting to consider that yet with the election going on. Everybody's a little bit busy, so we will try to get that scheduled soon. And after that, have a report back to council. On the report of the mayor, real quickly, I just wanted to mention, I just want to draft off of Councilmember Sonart's report that there will be the second annual pumpkin drop. So that's where they take the ladder truck, extend it all the way up there, and I get a chuck. I think I'm going to take a couple pumpkins up this time instead of just one, but get a chuck it off the side. It's a pretty fun time.
I have a question, Mayor.
Yes.
Is this pumpkin drop an equal opportunity event? I was wondering when the pumpkins get to drop something. Probably not, huh?
Yeah, no, I don't know. All I know is they basically told me to go there and chuck a pumpkin, which I was like, yep.
But how does the pumpkin feel about it?
For just so the council knows, BDO is doing our annual audit right now. I met with them just prior to our council meeting this evening. They work for council. Their contract is with us. They work for us. They work with Terry and his the finance department to go through the audit of the city, and just wanted to make sure that if anybody wants to meet with them, they're here. They're planning on being here tomorrow till about 3 o'clock or so. If you'd like to meet with them, they meet here in the conference room. You can call Ms. Sainer and let them, maybe have her notify them when you'd like to meet. And they said they would make time, adjust lunch hours or whatever they needed to do to meet with any council members that are interested. Also wanted to note I did attend the harvest auction at the Art Guild. It was awesome. They had a great time. Yeah, it was really neat to get out and see. Ryan Kapp was the auctioneer, I guess, and did a great job. And my wife ended up getting an original Thor Evenson, which was very cool for us because we're fans of his, and she was very excited. And I also got on my side, I'm not the art guy, I got a season pass to the Kenai Golf Course, so it wasn't really artsy, but it was right in my wheelhouse, I guess. And then last thing, I just wanted to say that appreciate all the work of the election officials this year. I come down here and I see our 2 weeks before the election, we got these gals that show up I think there's also maybe a gentleman every once in a while that show up and take care of the early voting and help our clerk out. And then obviously the day of the election, there's those officials that make sure that happens, and just wanted to say appreciate everybody who threw their name in the hat. I know that's sometimes difficult to do. You're kind of putting yourself out there and for service to the public, and appreciate that. And I'd also thank my supporters personally for the help that they gave me, and with that, I'll go to the administration reports. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Just a couple things tonight. On Monday of this week, we had our first session of leadership training. So 20 of us spent the day here in council chambers learning about emotional intelligence, which is just a fancy way of saying figuring out how to communicate effectively with people. It was actually a really good team building exercise. The second session is actually tomorrow afternoon. Got really good feedback from everyone that participated, and looking forward to that second session. This training module that we're going through with this group is actually going to take us all the way into March. So I only get to participate in the first part of it, but really looking forward to what it's going to do as far as building our team here at the city. I want to make sure that council knew that the executive director at the chamber, Brett Perry, resigned. We're working with them as they transition through this. They're going to close the facility for a couple of Mondays during this month, and we're accommodating that so they can more effectively manage through this period when they don't have an executive director. We are continuing to work on possible changes to healthcare offerings for our employees. It's something we talked about during the budget process, and we are doing that still. The HR director sent out a survey to all employees. We got good feedback from those, and we hope to incorporate that feedback into the process as we go forward and determine what the future of healthcare coverage looks like for our employees. The one thing that we're really focused on is trying to make sure that whatever direction we go, that the level of healthcare is equivalent to what it has been in the past. Really just looking to see if there are better options out there for the city as a whole. The last thing I have is we're working on putting together the RFP. As you know, we received a significant amount of grant funding for spruce bark beetle mitigation. So Tony Pryor is working with forestry to put together an RFP, get that out on the street, and hopefully mitigate that gully that runs through so many of our subdivisions here in town later this year, early part of winter. And that's all I've got, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions of the city manager? Councilmember Winger.
Thank you for your report, Mr. Ostrander. Just another question about lights. Driving around town last night, I don't know if you ever drive around the city of Kenai, and when it gets dark, we have numerous lights that are not working. One specifically out in front of the police department, and we have many lights that stay on throughout the day. We have many lights that aren't working in the evening. There's quite a few neighborhoods that also have lights that are not working. I've received reports from residents as far as Inlet Woods and over in other areas of the city that have complained about light issues. What are we going to do to address these? Do we have a path to have operating working lights? It's a public safety concern. What is our projected path on making sure that we're good going into the winter months?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Winger. So we have a contractor who is tasked with fixing all the lights in the city, managed through a contract with Mr. Curtin of Public Works. There's a process that we go through. There's a time period, and Scott can talk about it if you'd like, of when we expect to have all the lights done prior to winter. I think in the past it's been sometime this month, but we do have a contractor like we have every year. Several years ago we did have some issues with the contractor, but it's a new contractor now. So yeah, there's a process in place. It's the process that we've had ever since I've been here to get those lights fixed. So that contract should get the lights fixed.
Can I refer to Mr. Curtin? Can you let us know what the ETA on getting these lights repaired and fixed?
Sure. Through the mayor, thank you very much for the question. We actually got some assistance from the police department about 2 weeks ago, I believe. We had some officers overnight. We provided them with some maps, and they were kind enough to go around and mark out every light on all city streets for us. We then provided that list to Ketchmek Electric, who's under a term contract with us, and they've actually been actively out working on that list for about the last week and a half. The lights that are simple repairs, bulbs, let's say, are generally fixed right there on the spots. The ones that they don't have a part on hand, they make an initial assessment of what's causing the problem. Is it a breaker? Is it a line break? Is it a bulb? And then they make the repair accordingly, or they go out and purchase the parts that they need and come back. And depending on the part, it's usually 48 to 72 hours before they make the second trip back, depending on what was actually wrong. The simple repairs, I believe, will be done by the end of this week, Friday. A few others will linger into next week. I believe we had about 40 lights on that initial list. Some of them were in strings where we had a breaker that was taking out 3 or 4 lights. But I will add, I've never seen anything like this. We have this is like every year. We have 40 to 50 lights a year, every year at this time. I've never received a single phone call that any contractor or anyone doing any work at their house has actually hit a line. We've never been notified saying, oh, we hit a wire, we don't know what that is. And yet we still seem to have 40 to 50 of these lights a year. So it is an exhaustive thing for the department, and I wish I had a great answer for you that if we did this, we wouldn't have this issue. But there's no question, streetlights are a annual nightmare for our department. So, but I fully expect every light in the city should be operational before Halloween, and really by next week, the overwhelming majority of them. There's really no reason why. In the event we have a fixture, I know I want to say we've actually had a few that had been shot out. If I have to buy an entire new fixture, as opposed to just a bulb or a photocell, that may take, depending on the supply chain, a week or two longer. And I'm happy to let you know if that's the case. But I do anticipate that they'll all be operational here shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Curtin.
Thank you.
Further questions of the city manager? Vice Mayor Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Just two questions. One is the question about completion for the dog park project. Is that in our view for this year, or is Mother Nature not allowing us to complete that?
Mr. Ostrander?
I'll kick that to Scott.
Mr. Curtin?
Through the mayor, thank you very much. Vice Mayor Glendenning. So we have two active things at the dog park right now. We do now have contracts with Polar North to pour the concrete for the pavilion pad. Alex Bias with Polar North has told me he expects that pad to be in place by the end of next week. It has been getting pushed because of the weather and the rain. Fireweed fence, it took us several weeks to get them locked in the contract, but they are now as well locked in the contract. We are going to try and get the majority of that fence installed before the ground freezes. It's not going to be 100% because they're going to have to come back when the pavilion is actually constructed to tie that fence into the columns that are actually going to be part of the pavilion itself. And then, as you all know, the water table over there has been a tremendous issue. You look no further than the elevation of the pond that's adjacent to that, and then the water in the field. So we have gone over and put in some trenches to try and break through some of the clay. We actually have a clay layer there that is supporting some of that water and not allowing it to get down to sand. We punched some holes through that, and it is slowly helping that work. We will have some additional grading work to do, and this project will continue on into the spring months. So.
Thank you for your candid response.
Thank you.
One more. Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, just a curiosity of mine, and actually an interest of mine, is that we have many civil projects, mainly public projects, excuse me, that are underway. In your next report, you usually give a monthly report. Could we have a completion detail if something's deferred or if something is maybe not going to make it this season, or highlight the successes that we had? I'm getting comments about road repairs and this type of thing. I know we're on top of the wastewater situation, but perhaps some of our responsibilities that are more exposed to Mother Nature may need some refinement, understanding, and I will refer the phone calls I get to that report. Thank you.
Mr. Curtin.
Thank you. Through the mayor again. Vice Mayor Glendenning, I will actually have an updated format for my mid-month for you that'll kind of summarize all active projects to date, older projects as well as the ones just recently funded July 1st. We do have an extensive number of projects that are in the design phase. So we don't see a lot of construction right now because we're developing projects right now. And just to really quickly touch on, we have 8 primary projects right now that are actively being worked on. The Bluff project, as you know, with the Corps is a behemoth of a project with the Corps going through their process, routine meetings with that. And the runway rehab project is another large, $30 million project in design phase right now, regular active meetings on that. I've got about 65% design docs for the lift station renovation project. That's going to be renovating 3 lift stations. We've got the digester blower project is now in design phase. I have a assessment on my desk that I just got this past week for review. As far as the roadway projects, Wildwood Drive is at 95% design documents right now, and we're looking at other things that we might want to consider addressing at this time that are below the road. Things like other utilities and things like that we might want to include in the project now with the road being torn up. Willow Street extension, as you recall, is a two-phase project. This particular phase right now is from Main Street down towards the end of the airport operations building. That project has all the survey work has been complete, geotech is done, and they're working towards, they're around 35% design development on that. I would expect end of the year I should have finished bid ready documents for those. So those projects I'm anticipating going out for bid likely January in time for May, June construction season. The rec center improvements project that you're all aware of with the roof replacement and some of the HVAC systems, I actually received the final bid documents from the contractor or from the architect on yesterday. We're reviewing those for compliance as we speak. The finance director and I have been working on the rate study, which is another project, a long-going master plan rate study project. We've been actively having meetings on those in preparation for the upcoming budget, looking at the next 10 years of water, sewer, wastewater utility rates. So we're actively working on that. And then tomorrow, the Vintage Point boiler replacement project is actually advertising in the newspaper tomorrow. So you'll see that out there. And then just to touch on some of the active construction projects, and again, this will be in my report. I don't mean to dwell on these, but I think it's important that we touch base on this because there is a fair amount of projects that are actively going. The sludge press replacement project is actively in construction right now. Blazy Construction is working on that project. The well house relocation project is now in closeout. We have substantially completed that project, and we're working on closing out the finances on that. The dog park project we briefly discussed. We have an airfield drainage project that has been pushed because of the weather. The water table at the airport is so shallow that dewatering is almost impossible. It's like dewatering the ocean out there. We have pipes that are 10 feet down in the ground, and we have to be able to work in the dry, and there's just such a substantial amount of water out there. We haven't been able to do that. So we're kind of in this, pushing that project every 2 weeks, waiting for the conditions to get to the point where we can do that. The sand storage project, which has been deferred for some time, is actually underway right now. Steel for the building was actually delivered this last week. We are finalizing submittals, and the contractor, Orion Construction, is working on that project. We're not going to erect the building till next spring. I don't want to leave a concrete foundation sitting out there unprotected for the winter. So that project will start back up in May, but all the pieces and players are now in place, and that project is actually actively moving forward finally. Kenai Fire Department, we've got a flooring replacement project over there. We've worked through the details on that, and we have an active bid on that. Council this evening, we just added some additional money to the apparatus bay. We were short funding on that, and that just got addressed. So those are all in process with staff actively working on those. I would like to add, this has been a unique summer. We have put out multiple projects with no bids, getting back, and some smaller ones. And just to give you an example of those, I've been working with some folks at the Paradisos on sidewalks, and we've got the library that we started to work on, that we've got some concrete curbs. We put that out for bids, and we got no takers at this time of the year, so I'm going to have to defer that project. We had a repair project on Trading Bay to remove some asphalt and insulate a sewer line. Again, no bidders on that project. It's going to have to get deferred until I can find folks to do it. We had a sand screening bid that went out that came in way excessive. We didn't award a contract. It was way off base for what we had budgeted. And the visitor center roof replacement, we did actually put that out, but we didn't move forward with a contract on that as well because the costs were way out of line for what we were anticipating to do. So that is ready to go for rebidding. My intentions are to put that back out in January for a May, June roof replacement on that. So So I hope that gives you guys a little bit of information. You'll see more with the mid-month, little different format than you guys are used to be seeing. And then, as always, please, any other questions or anything I can do to help, please ask. Thank you.
Thank you for your thorough response.
Further questions of the city manager? Seeing none, we'll go to city attorney, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. I have no comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions of the city attorney? Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Ms. Stainer.
Thank you. Through the mayor. So in tonight's laydown, I put the unofficial results in and also a report of the outstanding voted ballot envelopes. Now, not that they're all going to count, but if all 216 we have in custody counted, that would bring our turnout up to 18.36%, which for somebody that puts this much into it, that higher turnout means a lot to me. Also to note that the Canvas Board will meet on October 11th, 2022. The 19 by requests that are out there, if they come back and they were postmarked on or before Election Day, will increase that 216 number. And there was something, and Mayor Gabriel asked me to give you guys a summary of what little bit of change we're going to do. So the charter and code indicate that the term of new members is the Monday following certification. So terms end Sunday and Monday. So all of our candidates will know who they are next Wednesday. Will be invited to come to the meeting on the 19th so that they can take their oath that day. Because if we wait to take their oath, their first meeting, they'll have been serving for 4 days without having taken an oath of office. So I'll ask them to come see me if they're not available for our meeting before their term begins.
And just for clarification, we can do a ceremonial swearing in on our next meeting?
Yes, if they come to the meeting, yes, we'll do a ceremonial swearing in of the newly elected people.
Very good. Any questions of the city clerk? Councilmember Basin.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Shelley, last night is an exciting night for everybody. Everybody's waiting for numbers to come in, and I'm waiting for numbers, and people are texting me. What is the process for the city of Kenai? You know, everybody's like, they want to see the numbers immediately. And I'm sure there's a process. Could you explain that just so the people out there can understand what you're having to do to get those numbers out?
So the process, if everything goes as planned, the precincts can plug into their scanner for the day, plugs into an analog line, and transmits directly to the borough. Sometimes that doesn't work, depending on what we're noticing is a lot of places are upgrading their lines and we're losing that analog, so we have to ensure there's an analog. So generally your totals are posted rather quickly. If they can't transmit, they bring their tapes here. To get those numbers to the borough, we start scanning the tapes that came out, the results tapes that came out to the borough so they can update. And then after we get all of our scans done, I sit down and update our webpage. So yes, it was because we have Nikiski, Salamatoff, and the 3 Kenai precincts report to me, so we had to get all of their tapes to the borough when they came in last night.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the city clerk? I have one. So that we got the election results for the council, the bond proposal. Was that on our website?
So the bond proposal was a borough race. I didn't put that on our website, but if you go to the front page of the borough, the top red words are election results, and you can click on jurisdiction wide and see the full bond proposal results.
Okay, per precinct.
Yes, so the absentee in question and special needs have not reported yet, but that will give you an idea.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious if we want to look through our precinct. That's where we get that information. Okay.
From the borough, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions of the city clerk? Seeing none, we will go to additional public comment. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to address the council at this time? Anybody online? Okay, very good. With that, we'll go to council comments. Let's start out with Councilmember Patty.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I too had the privilege to attend the harvest auction, and it was a very wonderful, stellar event. I want to congratulate Marion for such a lovely event. Thank you for all the work of the election officials that helped put on a smooth election. And I would like to thank all the folks who came out to vote and support our freedom, and the people who helped me with my campaign. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sonart.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I helped yesterday with Precinct 3 as a co-chair. Long, long day. And I want to thank Shelley, our clerk, because I know her day was even longer. And there's, I think everybody ought to get the opportunity to work an election at least one time in your life. If you've never done it, you need to do it at least one time, just to go through the process. It's kind of, it reminds me of flying. When you're taking off, it's scary, and when you're landing, it's scary. But generally speaking, when you're up in the air, you're just going and it's smooth. Yes, you do run into turbulence at times, but you deal with it. The day it's a great day. You see so many people from the community. You get to say hello and touch base with people you haven't seen in a long time. It's a good day, and I would just strongly encourage everybody to do it at least one time, because it is quite the process. And even after you've already put in 12 or 14 hours and the polls close at 8 p.m., that's when the real work begins. That 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock time, when you're already exhausted. Shelley's over there smiling. And you're trying to get everything accounted for, tapes printed, numbers balanced. It's a lot of brain cell activity between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. And then once you get everything collected and you load it up and you bring it back here, we have a lovely smiling clerk who's always happy to see us. So even though it's late, and she's dealing with 5 different precincts. But anyway, thank you to our clerk for making things run so smoothly yesterday, and thank you to all the voters who came out, and thank you all to all the people who ran. I mean, because you end up putting yourself out there, and it's not easy, it's not fun at all times, but that's what our city needs. It needs good people to step up. So thank you to all of you that did that.
Thank you. Councilmember Winger.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of volunteering and working with the Chambers Kenai River Marathon. It was a huge success. They didn't really have a quite rounded final numbers. I would guess well over 160 to 185 runners. The great thing about this is, even though it's not currently a Boston qualifier, we still see at least a dozen people come from out of state. So there was a couple that she had ran marathons her whole life through doctor orders. They told her to take an easier marathon. So she looked up and said, well, there's not a lot of inclines. This isn't like running the Seward Marathon. And they kind of threw a target on a map, and it landed in Alaska, and she drug her husband up, and she was in her 70s, and they participated. The last gentleman that ran over the finish line, it was his 97th marathon, and his goal was to hit 100, and he would not quit. And he, step by step, made it to that finish line and crossed over. And a lot of us had stayed after to root him on, and it was just great to see the fact that somebody is so dedicated and so committed. Always great to talk with people from all areas. Great event. I encourage everybody to support next year's. I always love Silas's school reports. Silas did say homecoming week was great. He had a great time with the homecoming dance. There's a lot going on with our schools, with football games and volleyball games. Wrestling season starting up. You have swim season starting up. I know our kids' school at Mountain View Elementary is gearing up for their fall carnival, which is the first time in the last 2 years that they've been able to resume that. And that will be next week. Always a great time. One of the favorite auction items is the fire truck ride. And that usually can fetch anywhere from $300 to $800 for a bid on the fire truck ride. I know they did ask if Chief Ross was going to give any rides or donate any rides. So, well, I guess I'll talk to you about that later. They did say they were okay if the students rode in the back seat. But again, it is a favorite. Look forward to going and participating in that. I just want to say thank you to all the awesome election workers and for your dedication and long hours. It doesn't go unnoticed. I'd like to thank my supporters, and I would like to congratulate Alex Dothett on a good, clean race, and I look forward to working with you.
Vice Mayor Glendenning.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'm going to just take a little different approach here, just kind of probably winding up my time on City Council, and it's been an adventure, and I'm not going to treat you to Frank Sinatra's song, but lots of times you'll notice I did it my way. And but thanks for cooperation, and sometimes I get positive responses, and I'm glad and grateful for that. I try and be a little evocative at times, and I would like to cooperate and work with others, and then sometimes you have to stand alone. But anyway, it has been an adventure, and I appreciate the time I've spent with you, and perhaps I can pop up as a reserve deputy sometime, and if you I'm plug and play, I can help out if you need, and if not, I'll just go on with my coin collection. Thank you.
You know you have another meeting, right?
Well, yeah, but
I know.
My
I just
time,
wanna make
other than the subcommittee, my time of being effective and submitting a legislation to be approved is over. It'll be ceremonial, and I appreciate your smile.
I just want to make sure you have that penciled in 2 weeks from tonight, okay?
Oh yeah, no. So, but I'm still trying to do it my way.
Councilmember Bazin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to echo a big thank you to all the election workers and to the clerk's office, and of course to everybody who run for office. It's a big deal. It was a big night last night. Special night at Kenai volleyball game last night against Soldotna. The ladies and the Booster Club raised $16,000 for killing cancer on the Kenai. I think that's the most they've ever raised. It was a big event. I saw some of the members here. I noticed one of the council members kept on bidding my wife up, so we bought 6 baskets, probably for a lot more than we should have. But it was fun, and they did a great job.
Thank you, Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you. First off, thanks to Councilmember Sonard and her husband for donating your time. Long day yesterday. Not in that district, but I appreciate that. And also our clerk, the smiling face that you met after all those hours. So that's wonderful. And Susan Smalley, who's still here, you have my respect. All the years that you've spent back since I was like 21 years old. But just about all my voting years. But at any rate, much appreciated, and I can't say enough good about that. That's quite a dedication, and you should be respected for all of that. Thank you very much. And thanks for the 2 commissioners that are here. Let me kind of grill you, but you know, if you and all of us come up and do that, hopefully it was all fun. And but it's just the way it works out. Thank you very much for coming and doing that, taking your time. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. As an informational item, just want to thank our representative on the Cookland Regional Citizens Advisory Council, former Mayor John Williams, and his report to the council. And with that, seeing no other additional business before this body, we are adjourned.